Welcome to What the Paper Said, in which I, Patrick Crozier, skim through the Times from 100 years ago, read some of the articles and comment on the ones I find interesting. In this episode, the week ending the 1st of June 1924, a man invents a death ray, or at least he says he does. Another man gets molested by trade unionists. Hundreds of millions of Chinese can only envy him. And I try to make sense of the Citroen standard equipment list. But first, some of the other items that have caught my attention this week. Last week we learnt that Sir Edward Goschen, British ambassador to Germany at the time of the outbreak of the First World War, had died. This week we learnt that Paul Cambon, who was French ambassador to Great Britain at the same time, has also died. The Italian King and Queen are in London for a state visit. President Coolidge has signed the US immigration bill, if somewhat reluctantly. This is the bill that bans Japanese immigration. A court of inquiry has opened to determine what the standard revenue of the Big Four railway companies should be. The standard revenue is what the government thinks the company's turnover should be if they run their businesses competently. This figure will then be used to determine what fares and fees the railways may charge. Whatever this new system is, it was introduced last year, it is a long way away from a free market. The inquiry into the Reading pit disaster that killed 40 miners, see the 30th of September episode, has concluded that the company in question failed to interpret its underground maps correctly, leading to a flood. Industry is dangerous, as we were reminded on Friday. A fall of slag from a Middlesbrough ironworks slag tip yesterday buried 3 workmen. One was rescued after some hours, but little injured. Another was taken out dead, and there was no hope last night for the third. But workers face other dangers. I saw this in a case involving Poplar Poor Law Board. Mr. John W. Hughes said that he was a permanent man in the employment of the Port of London Authority. When he tried to enter the dock gates, he was seized and thrown back into the mob of strikers, and it was more than an hour before he could get away. An hour? On some mornings he was molested before he got near the gates. He was threatened, and his wife went in great fear, and he therefore ceased work. He received no wages while he was out. This sort of intimidation was a feature of industrial disputes up until the 1980s. Quite a lot of violence this week. On Tuesday, the Times reported that a Walthamstow man had been sent to prison for 6 months for thrashing his son with a belt. Now, this sounds a bit odd. Everything I know about the age indicates that boys being thrashed was entirely standard practice. A bit like going down the pub. Certainly condoned, possibly even expected. I think the difference here is that the boy in question ended up in hospital. There is a controversy in Canada over the signing of the Treaty of Lausanne. That was the treaty between Turkey and the Allies that replaced the Treaty of Sèvres. Canada is objecting because it was not a party to the negotiations. Hitherto all its negotiations were undertaken on its behalf by the British government, but the Canadians want to assert their independence, which, spoiler alert, they will get in a few years' time. See, Americans? There was no need for all that pretentious nonsense and sucking up to the French in the 1770s. All you needed to do was to object to the signing of a treaty. A British party is in Nepal in an attempt to climb Mount Everest. Spoiler alert, they will fail. Probably. The novel A Passage to India by E.M. Forster has been published. What has become known as the Ampthill divorce case has been decided by the House of Lords, the highest court in the land. A Mr. Russell, heir to the Ampthill title, has claimed a divorce on the grounds of his wife's adultery. You needed grounds like that in those days. His wife claimed that while yes, she did have a son, and yes, the marriage was unconsummated, it was a virgin birth. The court has taken her side. How gallant. Lord Esher was the eminence grise of British politics in the early years of the 20th century. Never in office, but always there. Anyway, he has written a letter to the Times. There was a pregnant sentence in Mr. Shaw's recent speech in the House of Commons. Shaw is the Minister of Labour. It revealed where the difficulty lies. On the question of unemployment, he said that he possessed no powers beyond that of placing suggestions before his colleagues at the head of other departments, with whom initiative remains. This is the old difficulty which lay at the root of the problem of imperial defence. Problems which affected more than one department were generally left unsolved. And judging by the calls for joined-up government that have been going on for as long as I can remember, that is still the situation. What's the big story this week? The death ray. That'll be it. Mr. Grindle Matthews, the inventor of the death ray, had an interview at the Air Ministry on Saturday with Air Vice Marshal Sir Geoffrey Salmond, the Air Member for Supply and Research on the Air Council, as a result of which the Press Association understands that a demonstration of the invention will take place at the Inventors Laboratory in London this afternoon. So how did it go? This is from Tuesday. Mr. H.E. Wimperis, formerly Superintendent of the Air Ministry Laboratory at South Kensington, and now Acting Director of Scientific Research at the Air Ministry, yesterday morning visited the laboratory of Mr. Grindle Matthews, where he witnessed a demonstration of the possibilities of what is known as the death ray. There was more on Wednesday. The Air Ministry issued the following statement last night regarding the negotiations which have taken place with Mr. Grindle Matthews, the inventor of what is termed the death ray, and the action taken to examine the claims put forward by him. The Air Ministry, as long ago as February last, offered Mr. Grindle Matthews an opportunity to give a demonstration of his apparatus to their representatives, and since that date this invitation has been renewed on several occasions. The demonstration actually proposed by the inventor, and shown yesterday, consisted in lighting an Osglim electric lamp, don't know what that is, some sort of light, and in stopping at will a small motorcycle engine from a distance of about 15 yards. The demonstrations were carried out in the inventor's laboratory, all the apparatus being provided and arranged by him. Grindle Matthews was offered £1,000 to stop a motor provided by the government. Mr. Grindle Matthews has refused this offer, and it is understood that he has left the country. Which country? Mr. Grindle Matthews arrived at Le Bourget Aerodrome, that's in France, by aeroplane this afternoon, coming from London. On landing he was met by the director of the Chantier du Rhône, the Lyon company with which he has been in negotiation. Why do we insist upon putting an S on the end of French place names and then refusing to pronounce it? Anyway, if you haven't figured it out already, this is a fraud. Some are alive to it. This is a letter from Lord Birkenhead. Birkenhead, or F.E. Smith as he started off, is one of British politics' characters. He's had a busy week. He was one of the law lords in the Ampthill case. So much has been written of what is dramatically called the death ray by those who have no special claim to scientific knowledge that perhaps another layman may, without absurdity or presumption, contribute a word. When one reads of all the powers attributed to this remarkable ray, one becomes lost in admiration of the diverse genius of its inventor. Not only is it said to destroy life, set fire to anything inflammable, wreck aircraft, stop motor cars at a distance of 458 miles, and explode ammunition or other explosives, it is even claimed that it will cure cancer and detect submarines. It is sublime to think of this death-dealing weapon turning aside from its special lithiferous task to cure the sick, to realize the delicate adjustment of means to ends, which enables it to set fire to anything inflammable, and yet arrest the magneto in a car without igniting the petrol. It is also a poignant reflection that all these incredible benefits are denied to an unworthy country because its purblind authorities refuse to put a considerable sum at the inventor's disposal. This gentleman must indeed deplore the publicity, which even his reticence has been unable entirely to avoid, now alas, surrounding a discovery too confidential, apparently, to be set forth even in a secret patent. I didn't know such things existed. He then discusses the physics. Physics, after all, is, I believe, an exact and also an exacting science. That an unknown amateur should stumble upon an epoch-making discovery is about as likely as that a child of 5 should defeat either a champion chess player or Mademoiselle Longlen. Longlen was the dominant woman tennis player of the time. Is that true? The bit about physics? Oddly enough, the inventor of the microwave oven, which even oddlier is a sort of death ray, did so after he discovered that a chocolate bar in his pocket melted after he conducted an experiment with microwaves. So it is not impossible. And let's face it, the television, which some might describe as a type of death ray, was invented by a bloke in a shed. But most of the big advances in military technology of the last century, such as the atom bomb or GPS, were, to the best of my knowledge, made by highly trained experts. Questions were even asked in the House of Commons. This is from Thursday. Replying to Lieutenant Commander Kenworthy, Hull Central, Liberal, Mr. Leach, Under-Secretary for Air, Bradford Central, Labour, said, "The official statement issued to the press yesterday contains the essential facts as regards the invention of the so-called death ray. Mr. Grindle Matthews was offered and refused an opportunity to demonstrate his invention under conditions which would satisfy either scientists or businessmen. I wish to assure the House that every facility has been afforded to Mr. Grindle Matthews to give a demonstration under conditions satisfactory to himself and to the services. The departments have been placed in a difficult position in dealing with Mr. Grindle Matthews, partly because of the vigorous press campaign which has been conducted on behalf of this gentleman, and partly because this is not the first occasion on which this inventor has put forward schemes for which extravagant claims have been made." He is a fraud. Indeed, you have to wonder why the minister didn't say as much, given parliamentary privilege. That is, that you can say what you like about anyone and anything on the floor of the House of Commons. Anyway, you would have thought that would have wrapped it up, but no. This is also from Thursday. The 29th Annual Congress of the South Eastern Union of Scientific Societies opened at Guildford yesterday. Sir Richard Gregory, the President-elect, in reply referred as an example of what the public thought of science to the so-called death ray of Mr. Grindle Matthews. What happened on the preceding day? Mr. Grindle Matthews stopped a small motorcycle at a distance of 15 yards with a beam. Any physicist would say that was possible, and any physicist would be prepared to do it. Oh. I must admit I'm struggling to think how. By interfering with a spark? Something to do with microwaves, as mentioned earlier. If you are a scientist and you can see how it might be done, please let me know. China's introduction to modernity mainly consisted of it losing its wars to that pale-skinned and hideously ugly race of people known as Europeans, leading to them conceding a coastal territory to those same Europeans who managed to turn them into modern cities. In 1911 the monarchy was overthrown and a republic declared. Now, you might have thought this would have ushered in an age of technology, engineering and enterprise, but you would be wrong, as a Times correspondent reports. Life in this country at the present time is far from happy, either for the Chinese or for foreigners. Nothing goes well. The business of government as it used to be conducted in a loose but not ineffective manner is entirely disorganized. The authority of the central government has been destroyed, and what has arisen enjoys little respect and no confidence. The military rulers in the provinces are responsible to themselves alone, with the natural consequence that the people are exploited in order that provision may be made for the inordinate number of soldiers. River conservancy, a vital necessity in certain provinces, is neglected and disasters have occurred, and will surely increase in number. The desire for education everywhere manifest is thwarted because the funds that should be available are diverted. Trade languishes in the interior because of the irregular exactions on goods in transit or the imposition of illegal taxation. Capital is ebbing from the provinces and flooding the treaty ports, where it may be invested safely under foreign protection. Enterprise is stifled because it is certain that nothing can flourish while the Tuchons, warlords, are waiting to pounce upon the profits. The poor farmer never knows when the bandits may descend upon him, burn his homestead, commandeer his stock, and carry away his best wife and prettiest children. Or worse, when the troops supposed to be hunting the bandits billet themselves on him, taking all he has and ravishing his womenfolk. Even the coolie is never safe, for he is impressed to carry for troops and bandits alike, and discharged with kicks when exhausted. There is no law, and therefore no security for anything or anybody. Such is the position today in the greater part of China, and it is no exaggeration to say that peace, comfort, and happiness have departed from the people. Assuming, that is, they were ever there. He goes on to say that the government is bankrupt. And then he talks about attitudes towards foreigners. The defeat of Russia by Japan showed them that an Asiatic was not necessarily the inferior of the European. Their own revolution has proved to them that established things are not unbreakable. Above all, the Great War has released them from their obligations to a great foreign power, Germany I presume, or maybe Russia, and enabled them to take the initiative in dealing with Russia, once to them the most dangerous of the nations. Even Japan, for a time a serious menace, has ceased to threaten and has become a suitor for their goodwill. I wouldn't bet the farm on that. But getting back to the chaos, This is the great fear in Chinese politics, and when Chinese rulers centralize power, as Xi Jinping has been in recent years, this is why. Also note that the warlords do not seem able to figure out that if they want to maintain their position, they need to maintain their armies, and if they want to maintain their armies, they need money, and if they want money, it is better to have rich taxpayers than poor taxpayers, and if they want rich taxpayers, it is best to let them get rich in the first place, and they can't get rich if they can't be sure that everything they might have might get stolen tomorrow. Similar thinking, or lack of it, seems to prevail today in the occupied parts of Ukraine. To end, a Citroen advert in Thursday's edition usefully listed some of the equipment that comes as standard with their cars. Petrol gauge, driving mirror, speedometer, electric lighting, electric starting, electric horn, Boyce motor meter, which is a temperature gauge, implying that not all of this is standard on all cars. Then there are things you don't tend to get on cars these days, not even Rolls-Royces. Inspection lamp, mahogany toolbox, oil pressure indicator, ammeter. Your occasional reminder that as well as needing to be well off to run a car, you also need to be your own mechanic. And then there are things that have you guessing. 5 lamps. Okay, they probably don't have brake lights or indicators, so that leaves us with front and rear lights. That's 4. So what's the 5th? Hood envelope. I guess it's storage for the detachable roof. Folding rear windscreen. Actually, the illustration that accompanies the ad has a window between the front and rear seats, so I guess that's the window it's referring to. And then we get a couple of real head scratchers. Tecalamit chassis lubrication. All-weather side curtains. And then there's an item that Citroën provided 100 years ago as standard, and modern manufacturers don't and really ought to. Mats, front and rear. Anyway, that's all for this week. At this point, I believe I'm supposed to say something about liking and subscribing, if you're logged in, that is. In the meantime, I aim to have something up next week, but I promise nothing.